of questions, how they work. They're actually really tricky. And it's because in all the different tenses, they seem to look a little bit different. And with the verb to be, we seem to do things slightly differently. We certainly don't use a do or a did or a does. And then we have subject and object questions, which we'll look at in a second. It's on the second exercise on this page. And that makes things even trickier. And then we have indirect questions or reported questions. And again, that seems to make things even more confusing. So there are a lot of places you can trip up with questions, which is why we're going to look at them today. And of course, this is from a very famous book, this exercise. So I even think that some of the 10 or so people out there watching this class will be familiar already with this book and be able to guess that this is, of course, the Raymond Murphy grammar book. Now, you'll easily find this book, guys, if you just look up Intermediate English Grammar, Raymond Murphy. It is probably the best book out there for TEFL grammar. If you're a foreign student of English, if you're a foreign student learning English as a second language, I do recommend Raymond Murphy. In fact, I'll be surprised if you haven't already done something from this book with some kind of teacher, because most teachers use this book. So let's get started. Now, I want to make it clear that whenever we have a question, an ordinary question, let's say, because there are exceptions to this rule, you're going to see question word. And what do I mean by that? I mean a W word, usually. What, where, when, who, why. Yeah, all of those words will be at the start. That will be in the first position, question word. Then we get the auxiliary verb. Now, we'll see what this means in a moment, but I'll put some examples in brackets. Do, does, did. Any to be is very often an auxiliary verb as well. So in passive sentences, we'll see to be being used as an auxiliary. So was and is are certainly possible as well. And in present perfect, it'll be have or has. And with modal verbs, it will be the modal verb. So let's put some modal verbs as well. Should, will. That's a big long list already. For auxiliary verb, this is the word that will be in the second position. So if we look at that first, where do you live? I'm sure you can all see it. You can see where, that's our question word, our WH word. Then we have do, that's our auxiliary verb. Now, what we mean by an auxiliary verb is not the main verb. The main verb comes at the end of this question. The auxiliary verb is used in order to convey tense, the fact that it's a question, which is what we're looking at now, and also a number of other things like passive, and you can use auxiliary verbs for emphasis. There are a lot of different reasons for using auxiliary verbs. There are also question tags, which is something we're not going to cover today, but you can find information about online, and I've certainly covered it in other videos. So we've got the question word where, then we've got the auxiliary verb do, and now we get the subject, the subject of the verb. The subject of the verb comes in the third position in a typical question, and this is you in this sentence. Okay, and then the last word is the main verb live. Now, the main verb is sometimes in the infinitive. If it's after do or does or did, it will be in the infinitive. But if it's, or after a modal verb, for example, where should I go, for example. So go will be in the infinitive. But if it's in a continuous tense, it will be where are you living? Yeah, so living, it will be in the ing form of the verb if it's a continuous tense. Okay, so there are a lot of complications here, I must admit. And I do want to add that if you have a preposition, that also needs to be in the question. The preposition in everyday English goes at the end of the word, at end of the question. It doesn't go at the start. Yeah. In old-fashioned English, you do often see with whom do you live? Yeah. But in modern English, everybody says, who do you live with? And puts the preposition at the end. Same with any other preposition. Yeah. What are you talking about? And not about what are you talking? Which sounds incredibly formal and over the top. In everyday English, we put the preposition at the end after the verb. Yeah. So if the verb takes a preposition, if it's very often seen with a preposition, like who do you live with? Yeah, I live with my mum or whatever. The preposition goes at the end, and I really stress that just because it's a very common mistake. Okay, so if we look at the next one, which we've got to make ourselves, we're going to follow the same pattern. And if we follow the same pattern, you notice that not every question, yes and no questions, don't have what, where, when, who, why. They don't need a question word, but we still follow exactly the same order. So we say, for the question, no, I was born in London, it would be, were you born there? Yeah, were you born there? It has to be in the past because this happened a long time ago when you were born, yeah? And it's got to be with the verb to be first. Now, I must admit here, the verb to be it's an auxiliary verb, but it's making passive, yeah? I was born is passive. You don't really see the verb to be born in active, by the way, and I wouldn't try and use it because it will sound strange. But were you born there? We can see it's auxiliary verb, were, subject, you, main verb, born. Now, I must admit, this is the past participle. It's not the infinitive. It's not the ing form. It's the past participle because we always use the past participle in passive. And this is a passive sentence. So were you born there? No, I was born in London, but we're still following the same order. Next one. Are you married? Yeah. Present tense this time because we are talking about now. Yeah, are you married now and not were you married 3 years ago or something like that. But are you married? It's still auxiliary verb, are, subject, you, and then main verb, and it's the past participle again because it's passive. Are you married? Okay. Now the next one starts with how long, and that's a clue that you probably need, although not always, you probably need present perfect tense. Yeah. And we know this because present perfect, it's very often used for how long. Yeah. How long have you been, how long have you had your car? Yeah. How long have you had your computer? Have you had? Yeah. It's got to be like that. And here it will be how long have you been married? Because he is still married. If he had said no, then we would have had to say, how long were you married? Past simple. Yeah, but notice it's still question word, how long, auxiliary verb, were, subject, you, and then past participle, married. Yeah, in the passive. That's past simple passive. But because he's still married, it's got to be how long, yeah, have, auxiliary verb, you, subject, and then we have the rest of the passive for been married. Yeah, that's the past participle of be and the past participle of married. And we need that in passive in present perfect. And that's where we put the been. We don't put it earlier. It's not have been you. It's have you been married. But I think most people are familiar with this. So I have been married for 17 years. Next one. Children, question mark. So it doesn't need a what or a where or a how long. So that's why we start with the auxiliary verb. It's do, you, subject, have, main verb, and it's in the infinitive because there's a do here. Do you have children? Yes, I have 2 boys. Yeah. Number 6, how old? Now we're talking about now, aren't we? How old, question word, are, there's our. Now, I must admit, I wouldn't call it an auxiliary verb here. This is just to be. But when you make a question with to be, you need to do exactly the same. You need the you need the verb to be before the subject. Just like when it's functioning as an auxiliary, it goes before the subject. So how old are they? And because are is the main verb here, we don't have a main verb after the subject. And this is why it's tricky. I agree, this is a kind of different pattern that we're seeing, but it's still got the how old, question word, are, okay, to be, not functioning as an auxiliary here, but still it's in the same position as it usually is. How old are they? Yeah, they are 12 and 15. Okay, what? Next one, it's got a question word, what? So we need then the auxiliary verb, do, and then the subject, you, and then the main verb, do. What do you do? Yeah, this is how we ask about somebody's job. What do you do? Yeah, so there's 2 do's there, which might look strange to a lot of people, but I am a journalist. That's how we ask about somebody's work. What do you do? And notice it's still question word, auxiliary verb, subject, main verb, and we'll do the same with number 8. We're still going to use present simple because this is something that happens every day, every week, every month, every year. What does your wife do? She is a doctor every day, every month, every year. Yeah. So present simple for those two. Now let's keep going with the perhaps trickier part, although I like the way Raymond Murphy has made this exercise, because I think this makes it very clear, subject-object questions. And that's not something that's easy to teach, in particular to young students, although they do get it, in my opinion, when you show them this grammar in this way. So look at the first two questions. You've got to remember that when with questions beginning with who and what, and it really is with who and what that this is important. If the question word is subject, and what do I mean? Well, in number one, somebody hit me. Yeah, if you want to ask who hit you, there's no auxiliary verb in this question. And it's because the question word is subject. Okay, now this isn't simple, but you will see a pattern in this exercise. So somebody hit me. If you want to make that into a question, you just say who hit you? And it's because the who is the subject, the somebody hit me. But if you look at number two, I hit somebody, and we want to make that into a question. Well, the somebody, the question word, the who, is now the object of hit and not the subject of hit. And that's why we need an auxiliary verb. Here it is. Who did you hit? That's how we make that into a question. Who did you hit? So question word, auxiliary, subject, infinitive. But when the question word is subject, yeah, who hit you? Who sang this song? Who played for Barcelona in 2011 in the, I don't know, as a striker? You each time the question word is the subject, and that's why there's no auxiliary verb. So let's try this exercise. Somebody paid the bill. So the somebody, the who, is the subject. So no auxiliary. Who paid the bill? And there's no inversion in these questions. There's no reversal of the subject and the verb like there is in other questions. Okay, and so that's important. So something happened. The something is the subject. This is why we say what happened and not what did happen. Yeah, just what happened. Yeah, there's no subject here. The subject is the question word. What happened? So Diane said something. The something is the object of said. So what did Diane say? Yeah, question word, auxiliary, subject, infinitive. But this book belongs to somebody. Okay, same again. Somebody is the object, not the subject. So who does this book belong to? Yeah, we've got to have question word, auxiliary verb, subject, infinitive. Again, who does this book belong to? And notice that the preposition to goes at the end, like I was saying earlier. Yeah, or as I was saying earlier in more formal English. Next one, somebody lives in that house. So somebody is clearly the subject of lives. So who lives in that house? Yeah, simple as that. I know it's not simple, by the way, but yeah, who lives in that house? I fell over something. Something is the object. So what did you fall over? Yeah, or what did I fall over if you want to keep it as I, but it will always have an auxiliary here because we're asking about the object and not about the subject. So what did, what did you fall over? Okay, something fell off the shelf. Here, the something is the subject. Yeah, so what fell off the shelf? Yeah, you don't have to worry about auxiliaries here. You don't have to worry about reversal or inversion. So what fell off the shelf? This word means something. Something is clearly the object. So what does this word mean? Now, not what means this word. Yeah, what does this word mean? It must have an auxiliary. But I borrowed the money from somebody. Okay, again, it's object. It's the object of the preposition from. And I guarantee that preposition is going to be at the end of the question. But let's try it of who did you borrow the money from? Yeah, it's normal to put the preposition at the end. The preposition must go at the end of any question. In any everyday English, anyway, that I listen to, that's where I see the preposition always being put. Okay, and then I'm worried about something. Something here is the object of the preposition about. Again, you can expect to see that at the end of the sentence. And so what are you worried about? And that's passive. It's present simple. What? That's where we've got the auxiliary verb are. You, then past participle worried. And then you have the preposition at the end. What are you worried about? Okay, so thanks everybody for joining us. Yeah, I am thinking about writing another book, maybe not on phrase verbs, maybe on idioms or something like that. But I must admit, I actually find it more interesting to write about grammar and rhetoric than I do about vocabulary. But we will see. They're both important, of course, for improving your language. And yeah, I do plan on coming back very often for classes. I'm afraid fixing a time is really difficult. But I suppose tomorrow at 8 a.m. UK time, it's very likely I'll come on about that time, maybe 8:15 a.m. So if you want to set your alarms right now, 8 a.m. tomorrow, UK time, not your time, whatever that is, unless you're living in the UK or somewhere that shares our time zone, it will be about 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, UK time. Okay, I'm really glad that you love the book, Hannah. Thanks very much. And I saw that somebody else said they just bought the phrasal verbs book, I think. So thanks very much. I do appreciate all the support, guys. The books will continue to be sold on Amazon and on my website. And please go to the website if you want to see all of these classes. I will put them up with some of the exercises as well. And we'll do a little bit more on perhaps some questions grammar, because I know it's not easy at all. And we haven't looked at reported questions today. We haven't looked at indirect questions. They're pretty similar. And we certainly haven't looked at question tags, stuff like that, echo questions. There's quite a lot actually we could talk about with questions. Anyway, that's a general summary, and I think there are a lot of mistakes with what we've seen today. And please do go out and get the Raymond Murphy book if you think that that's a good exercise. I actually think it's a great exercise, and it's rare that you see someone explaining it so clearly with showing you that when it's at the start of the sentence, when it's the subject, no auxiliary. When it's the object, you'll need an auxiliary. Okay, so thanks everybody for coming, and I hope to see you all soon.